All right, welcome to our Wednesday evening Bible class. If you'd like to open up your Bibles to Joshua chapter 9, we're going to begin in chapter 9 tonight. So tonight we're going to look at what I call the treaty and the battle of 5 kings. I don't know how far we'll get into the battle of the 5 kings in chapter 10. We'll see. It just depends on how far the discussion goes. There's a lot on both of these, the treaty that's established with the Gibeonites, and then the battle of the 5 kings that follows right behind that. So before we continue, let's go and have a word of prayer. Our most blessed Father, we once again come to study your glorious word, and we pray that as we do so, we'll be able to clear our minds and hearts and be able to listen to the scripture as we read it. Look for the wisdom that you're trying to reveal to us, that we can make it a real part of who we are, so that it can shape us into the spirit of your Son and be able to reflect that in our everyday life. We thank you for everybody who is participating in this study. We pray that you continue to bless us as you have done in the past. We look forward to the many blessings ahead of us. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so last week after they had accomplished the defeat of Ai, we saw that they moved north. They moved north quite a distance up to Mount Elba, and there they renewed the covenant. We talked about the tablet of the cursed. I don't know if you had a chance to go and look that up on YouTube, but you can see it's the cursed tablet Elba, E-B-A-L. It just astonishing, the fact that they found that on this very mountain where Joshua was recorded in this event in Joshua 8, where they had gone up and rededicated and read it. And they were fulfilling what Moses had directed them in Deuteronomy chapter 27. And he told them that once they crossed the land, crossed over, that they were to go up to Mount Elba. And that's a very strategic spiritual place because it's where Shechem is. It's where Abraham came in. There's just so many things about that valley. Divides up the tribes, half on one side, half on the other, and they read the curses from Mount Elba, and from the other side, they read the blessings. So, and that cursed tablet that they found, I highly recommend because it's really faith-building when you look at the fact that archaeology, once again, is showing that God does exist and the Bible is right. And the fact that it also dispels the idea that the Hebrews couldn't write and that showed the first word of Yahweh as written by the Hebrews the first time. And so they've even been able to date it to that time frame. So, and they also concur, almost all archaeologists, that this is a Hebrew cursed tablet. So how did it get on Elba? Had to be Joshua. So after they've accomplished this, we see that they moved back south, and this is where we start to we'll look at some maps as we go on. But the effect is starting to have this psychological impact on all the people in the land of Canaan that is starting to see this. There seems to be that there was a little bit of a hope that maybe because they were defeated by the city of Ai, that maybe we can beat them. But Ai was such a stronghold, and the way they defeated them so decisively, and they moved. They actually travel and go north, nearly 30 miles to Elba, in hostile. They haven't conquered any of that yet, and move all the way up there, and they're moving without impunity. So they're very afraid, and that's what chapter 9 of Joshua opens up in the first 2 verses. And if you're online, please contribute. I'm looking at the comments here so I can interact with you. If you have any comments, questions, concerns about what we're talking about. You may later on, when we get into this, there's some good discussion when we get to chapter 10. So now the impression is what the psychological impact of what the children of Israel, as they're over there occupying now the land and starting to go about conquering. And it came to pass when all the kings who were on this side of the Jordan, in the hills and in the lowland and the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite, Amorite, Canaanite, Perizzite, Hivite, Jebusite, heard about it, that they all gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord. So that's smart. Now that also shows these were small little republics, very independent. They were more still in the city-state type of an arrangement. So all these kings by themselves, we're not going to be able to stop them. So that's why we have the list of all of these. Even down on the coastland, we see where they as well are starting together, which is smart. I mean, if you're going to try to put up a defense, don't try to do it by yourself. But there is one group of people that decide, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to fight. And so in Joshua 9:3, we read about the Gibeonites. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard that Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they were on their part acted with cunning, and they went and made ready provisions and took out sacks of their donkeys and wineskins, worn out and torn and mended, with worn out patched sandals on their feet and worn out clothes, and all their provisions were dry and crumbling. And they went to Joshua in Camp Gilgal, and they said to him, "Men of Israel, we have come to you from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us." This has created a lot of conversation, and this is going to have some really profound lessons too that we'll look at as we dig into this more. First off, the Gibeonites are very powerful. They're not the weak link, and that's what we're going to see later on, is that they're mighty men of valor. Something has created within the leadership of the Gibeonites that, you know what, we can't beat these guys. So let's surrender, in a sense. They must know somehow that they can't directly negotiate a truce, because they could have sent a peace delegation to Gilgal and sat down with Joshua. So that's why I'm saying it's interesting they go to the plot to deceive them. Why? Why was that going to be better? That was kind of my question as I look at this. Why would that be better than just sending outright a delegation of peace and saying, we surrender and whatever you want? But somehow thinking that if we deceive them, that we're from afar off, that they're going to leave us alone. Now, why do you think they would do that? What's the advantage of giving this delusion, this lie, that they're from a far off nation? And why would they care? Isn't that good questions? I mean,
well, I think weren't they fighting all some of the nations, getting them out of that territory? The nations that were near, they were supposed to be taking them out. If I'm thinking correctly.
It's kind of, because we don't know that they say exactly location, where they're from. But if you look on the map there, you see where the Jordan is coming up. So everything on what they call Trans-Jordan, cross Jordan, and you hear that word Trans-Jordan, that's what they're talking about, has already been defeated. The Amorites, the Moabites, the Edomites, pretty much. I mean, they're not destroyed and annihilated, but they've been quashed as they've come through. Moses defeated almost all the kings over on the other side of Jordan. So when I thought about this, I thought, okay, so why would they come without, like I said, a royal delegation and just straight up sue for peace? And then it's like, so they figured that wouldn't work. They must have thought being straightforward is not going to work with them. And why would it not work? Something's told them it won't work. Now, if we go back, we know it won't work. Why? Why would it not work? Trying to sue for peace. They're under judgment. God has said, burn it down. Burn it. Everything in this land, there's a judgment coming. Everybody on this side of the river is going to go down. So I think they knew this. I think they understood that Joshua would not sit down with them and say, okay, you surrender, give us all your bow and arrows and your weapons, and,
they were just plunging forward no matter what. It's like that fire. Nothing was going to stop them. They were going to continue down this way. But like they said, their elders and everybody there had told them to come do this, and because they had heard of Joshua's God.
Which also adds to the point where if they're found, okay, so let's put ourselves as a Gibeonite, okay? What do you know about them? Well, you know they've been spending 40 years. They come out of Egypt. They destroy Egypt. Egypt's been talking about them for 40 years. Because now remember, this is the highway, the interstate from Egypt to Europe. And so commerce for 40 years has been coming from Egypt back and forth, and they've been hearing what happened. Yeah, I was there, man. You should have seen what happened to us. Yeah, my dad was telling me 40 years go by, and they've heard about what happened. So they know that God destroyed the most powerful nation. Then they know, you know what? They went through the Red Sea. Their God parted the water, they walked through it, and then collapsed it and destroyed our Pharaoh and destroyed our army. And then for 40 years, they've been out there just waxing everybody. And they're living in the desert, and guess what? They got no food. They're nomadic. Where are they eating from? What? Stuff's coming from the sky? You don't keep all that manna and the quail and all this stuff top secret. It's going to get out. Over 40 years, slowly. It wasn't like they were in this bubble that traveled around and nobody knew what was going on inside the camp of the Hebrews while they wandered. There was a lot of intelligence. Because we know Rahab, when they get to Jericho, right? They go, whoa, we've heard about you. So come back and be a Gibeonite, okay? So you know they destroyed Egypt. They destroyed everybody that they came into contact on the other side. They miraculously were being taken care of and fed. And then they come across the river and they destroy great fortresses, and they're heading our way. And I believe they knew that these Hebrews were under a command from their God to bring forth judgment and destroy everything. And also, even the failure at Ai was a warning, wasn't it? It was a warning that everything in Jericho, that everything has to be destroyed. Because the kings would be wanting to know, why did they lose at Ai? What happened there? Wouldn't you want to know? I mean, because they're coming for you, so you're going to want to know everything that happens, what's going on. And one of the things would have come back, well, they chased them off, they killed 37 of them, and then all of a sudden they come up and they took this guy, and they found that he had stole some of the forbidden stuff because everything was supposed to be destroyed. And they killed that guy, and they buried stones on top of him, and then he went up and they smashed and double enveloped and did. So all this information, it's not just that this big, strong army is kind of marching along. I think they know a lot. And I don't think God's hiding it. I think God wants them to know.
Yeah.
Look what I did to Egypt. Look at the gods I crushed down there. Look at the gods of Transjordan and the kings that were so powerful. Crushed them because of their false worship and their idolatry and abominations of what they're doing. So, if you're a Gibeonite and you know all this about these Hebrews, you're sitting there going, man, if we show up with a formal role of negotiating, they're just going to kill us.
Yeah.
But now here's the other side to this. What are they going to do when they find out the truth? Wouldn't that be your next question if you're a Gibeonite and you've been assigned to go on this journey? My next question would be, hey, boss, as soon as they find out that we're Gibeonites, what do you think they're going to do to us?
Well, they already have the treaty. So if they don't want to break the treaty, that's like a oath or they can't break that.
Yeah.
But see, now you're assuming that they hold true to their treaties, the Hebrews.
That's true.
I think they knew. I think they knew. That's what I'm saying. I think they knew a lot about the Hebrews and the Israelis, because they understood their God and they knew so much about what was going on, that this deception, in a sense, is revealing really a lot of knowledge of what the people know. It's not this marauding group that just comes out of nowhere in the desert after 40 years and just starts being victorious. No. For 40 years, they've been learning and studying that marauding group out there in the desert. And they've been learning as well about their God. Rahab knew about their God. Don't you think these kings as well did not send spies to go and sit around the camp of one of them or traveling through and talking to, there's 3 million people. You could have talked to anybody on the outside of the camp and found out some things about him, learn about him, find out about this God, get everything you could know. And I think that's why the Gibeonites understand, one, we're in judgment. We're marked for destruction. Two, if we just go forward to them, they're just going to destroy us, and he cannot go into a treaty with us. He's forbidden. And that's true. But they know more than that, because there's another part of Deuteronomy that Moses said that you can make treaties if they're living across the Jordan. Did you remember that? Yeah. So that's what we do. That's what I used to look at this as kind of a silly little ploy, just kind of skip over it. But oh man, look at what it's revealing to us, that what the Gibeonites know about them. And the fact that they could come up with this deception and feel confident that they could hook it and they could get into a treaty that the Hebrews could not violate against their own God. And they would not. Otherwise, why send them? You're a Gibeonite dressed in nice clothes as an official delegation, we kill you. You're a Gibeonite dressed up as hobos traveling and you lied to us, we kill you. There has to be a knowledge of saying there's hope. What hope would they have? Hope, like you said, Lorenzo, that they're going to stay true to their treaty. And that's an aspect for years I never got until I started really looking and thinking and asking those questions about why would they go to all this trouble? Go join the forces. And I'm serious. If you look at the map, you can, I don't know if you can barely see it on the map. I don't know on YouTube, but if you look at Gibeon is in this region down in here. They're all the way up here. This is a road. I don't know if you can see it, but that's a road that travels and slices all the way through here. Gibeon's off to the side, but they are a blocking force for all the other kings. And that's why this is one of the largest dominoes. When Gibeon falls and they surrender, that's what triggers the rest of the story of chapter 10 as well. But the Gibeons, they understand, that we have no other option. Now, where's God in this? That's the thing we have to ask. So here they come. They have this deception that they're going to ploy, and they're asking for a treaty. Now, they've come across to Ai. They traveled up to. Every map has different names for places, which drives me crazy. But Elba, Mount Elba. And then we find they've traveled back down to Gilgal. Now, I found out there's 2 Gilgals. There's one Gilgal that is over on this side, down where Jericho sits in the valley down in here. And then there's a Gilgal over here. Now, as we read the text, we see that they basically move from Jericho up, destroy Ai, then they go up, and I just have a hard time believing that they turned and went all the way back down into the valley, that elevation, because they're below sea level. So I just kind of, and you can argue, and that's fine. I think they moved up, did their rededication, and came down to a Gilgal that they found here, just on the other side of Bethel, and they're sitting there. When the Gibeonites come up, and they travel up and meet with the delegation, they send that delegation. And if you look at the arrangement, they are the first ones that are going to have to go to battle. Now, at this point, they're trying to organize. The southern kings are trying to get themselves together. I guess I could jump to this map here. This one has. Now, these are key. Again, this is that second Gilgal. There's one over here. And this is the road. You can see the dotted line as it travels through here. And look who is the next biggest one. Now, here's this, anybody, here's some extra bonus. I'll give you a smiley face. What is Jebus? What's another name for that place? These are Jebusites. Any key? Does it strike any memory? Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem. Future. You know who else come from there? What other famous person that Abraham ran across that was from here? Melchizedek. Hold on to that. This is the king that's going to organize all these other kings in this region here to try to put up a blocking force to stop the Israelites from coming down. The Gibeonites say, no, you know what? We're not. We're going to go up and we're going to try to find a peaceful solution to this. And so they're also classified as Hivites. Gibeonites, Hivites. And we're going to talk more about the Gibeonites because they play a huge historical role in the history of Israel later on in the King David, Saul, and going forward. Even through up to Solomon, they play a big role after this. But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, perhaps you live among us? Then how can we make a covenant with you? You see? So they're saying straight up, hey, and what he means by that, in other words, if you're on this side of the Jordan, how can we make a covenant with you? Because we're here to destroy you. And they said, we're your servants. And Joshua said to them, who are you? Where do you come from? And so they bring up this idea. I didn't want to put all the verses up, so I don't have every verse as we go through here. So I'm going to kind of come back and forth between the slides and also in my Bible program. And they said to him, from a very distant country, your servants have come because the name of, why? Why have they come? The name of the Lord your God. So they have knowledge, see, like I was saying. For we have heard a report of him and all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and to Og, king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our country said to us, take provisions in your hand for the sojourn and go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Come now, make a covenant with us. Here's our bread. It was warm, still warm when we took it out of our houses, our food, and for the journey, and on the day we set out to come to see you. But now, behold, it's dry and crumbly. Some translations say moldy.
That's what mine says.
Does it?
You know, one thing that's always kind of bothered me was like when these people gave the word or they had an oath or something like that, they wouldn't go back on it, even when they were fooled like these people. They made the oath and they got to stick with it, except for maybe Pharaoh.
Well,
Kind of weird. It seemed like a little strange to me.
we'll talk some more when we get specifically into like oaths and stuff, because what did we used to say, even in America for a long time? A handshake was what?
Oh, yeah, your word.
Now you got to have a notary, you have witnesses, a credit check, you have to have so much % down, you have to have collateral, you have to have why? Because people's word is worthless. It's worthless.
They're defaulting, yeah.
You know, 150 years ago, you go to the bank and the guy goes, Earl, yep, you got it, here you go, here's some money, go. Because he knew he was good for it. His word was good. So anyway, yeah, it is. But like I said, I think, you know, when we look at this, it's really supporting this idea that this deception, they know God, they know their God, but they never say the actual location, do they? That's something that, this is a failure, that this starts to show the failure with the elders and Joshua in validating who they really are. And just because you can show, you know, look, we got moldy bread, you know, we've got worn out clothes. I mean, come on, really? I mean.
It was a pure deception from the beginning. Faraway country.
Even our wineskins, look at them, they were new when we left. And look at them now, they're all rotten. And like, wow, were they just not wanting to fight? Were they just like, we don't want to go back over the river and fight these guys? I mean, let's go ahead. And then also the fact that Moses had said, you can have a treaty as long as they're not on this side where you're sitting. That's why they said, how can we make a treaty with you if you're in our neighborhood? And so I think that the fact that they just assumed, well, okay, they're not over here. We're not going to have to fight them. And they're on that side of the Jordan somewhere. Why not? Let's make a treaty, and just a lot quicker about making that arrangement. Now, look at 14. So the men took some of their provisions. What were they doing? So some of the Hebrews, the Israelites, took some of their provisions. To me, that says they're looking at it. They probably tasted the bread. Yeah, that's moldy. Look at the wine. They're kind of saying we're looking at the physical evidence that's presented before us and kind of saying, okay, kind of validate it. But look at the last part of that. Did not ask counsel from the Lord. Come on, guys. Last time when you went up against AI and you had sin in the camp, you didn't check with the Lord. You sent those men up, 3,000, thinking, we can take AI. But again, failure to go with what the Lord and asking him was one of the greatest failures. And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live. And the leaders of the congregation swore to them. There we go. Sealed. So this is all of the leaders, all the elders of the tribes as well. But it doesn't last, does it? At the end of 3 days after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were neighbors. I don't know. What does your translation say? Does it say neighbors?
Yeah.
Neighbors?
They were their neighbors who dwelt near them.
Yeah. See, when I read that, it's just kind of an odd thing. When I think of a neighbor, I think of like where I live and they live next door to me. And right now they're encamped and they're like marching. So how is anybody your neighbor if you're an army on the move? So just to help people, that you understand that they're talking about, in other words, you're on the wrong side of the river. You're on this side in our territory, our avenue of destruction, basically, of judgment. But after 3 days, they found it, but it was too late. So they heard that they were there, and now look at the response. And the people of Israel set out and reached their cities on the third day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Cherahai, Beeroth, Kirath Jearim. But the people of Israel did not attack them because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. Then all the congregation murmured against the leaders. You better believe it, right? I read one thing that, and it's very cynical. Some of them were murmuring because, man, we just lost some booty. We're not going to get the bounty, and go get all this from them. But that, I mean, why would they care? That does beg to think, that your leaders made it. Why do you care? You don't have to die fighting these guys now. So there is something about the idea of why are they upset against their leaders? Are you telling me that they're so self-righteous that all the people are so religious? Maybe maybe they are. But the point is, it created this division. It created this problem between them. But the leaders don't change. They hold fast because they have made this covenant. But all the leaders said to the congregation, we have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. So, Gary, you were talking about, they made a covenant, and they're going to have to hold to it. And this is where I also think that why they had some understanding that if they swore to their God, this Hebrew God, that they would have been bound to it, that somehow maybe they understood, the Gibeonites understood that. Because, I mean, if you were an evil king, you'd just say, hey, you lied. That violates the treaty. It's like a covenant, right? I mean, if one deceives the other, then the covenant can be annulled. But this isn't just a covenant, this is a swearing. And you never swear unless you're going to hold true to it. Even Jesus said, let your yes be a yes and your no be a no. And we could go through all sorts of verses. I started pulling them up all over the place about this idea of you need to be true to your word. And the other problem is they're representing God. And God doesn't change. His word is true. And so when they invoke God into this swearing, they're bringing his character into that as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
So if they lie, if they turn, Joshua and the leaders decide, you know what, it was in bad faith. I know we swore to God, but we're going to go ahead and punish you because judgment is supposed to be on you. You lied to us. That is a change because God had said, you used my name, you brought my character into this, and now you are bound. You're bound to that. So a couple of things that we can kind of learn real quick over this is this idea that be careful about our swearing, right? I mean, that's nothing new. People do that all the time. And I think that's the problem with our, like we've seen how our trustworthiness of people today. Oh, I'll pay you back. You know, now, I learned a long time ago that if I'm willing to loan something to somebody, just kiss it goodbye. It's a lot less stressful, isn't it? Just let it go. Because a lot of times people, oh, I swear I will pay you back or I'll do this to you. And it's like, that's not the same anymore. But that doesn't mean it's changed with God. That as Christians, that when we say something, we need to do it. If we have promised somebody something, then we need to hold true to it. Because God's promise never changes for us. He never alters it. And we need to reflect that character to people that are around us as well. Now, they get away with it? Partially. Whenever he says that, but they're not going to get completely away. They're still going to have to submit to them.
But then on the other hand, how would Joshua and those find out who these people really were from? They say they're from faraway country. Are they going to go follow them back and then their camp be left where people could fight them? I mean,
well, one thing you could do is say, okay, we're going to reprovision you. I'm going to send 2 of my best men, and they're going to go back, and we want you to take him to your king to validate this. And we'll wait. Because it wouldn't shut them down. If you think about it, they could have continued their mission of going ahead and conquering and said, okay, you guys, we're going to keep half of you guys here with us, and one of you is going to go back with my men to wherever you're from and validate this. In other words, like hostage. We're going to hold the rest.
That's what I was going to say.
That happened all the time, didn't it? I mean,
if you don't make a covenant with us, we're going to kill them.
Yeah, we'll hold you hostage.
Yeah.
We'll send some of my men. Joshua could have said, with you, you guys go back. They need to find out where you're actually from and meet your king and make sure this is a good agreement.
Or seek God. Or seek.
Oh, wow. Or just ask God, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the world would just say, God's talking to him.
Yeah.
So that would have been the fastest. But in a worldly way, it would have been, we hold all your guys hostage, but one guy, I'm going to send representatives with you. You go back. He needs to meet and verify where you're from and everything else to make sure. Because I understand there's a part of what the people are saying. You know what? You have now blown it. We were told we need to bring this judgment and fulfill what God wants, and they are under a judgment that should have been carried forward. But Joshua and the leaders, they come up with verse 21. The leaders said to them, let them live. And so they became cutters of wood and drawers of water for all the congregation, just as the leaders had said to them. So they're gonna end up being subservient. They're never gonna achieve total equality in the nation of Israel. They're gonna end up serving. And if we go back, jump back to the map here, and if I could shift that map up, one of the things that you notice, this is gonna be where the ark and the tabernacle is gonna be for a while during David, because they're serving the tabernacle. Solomon, when he becomes king as a young boy, he travels up there, and that's where he offers all the sacrifices. That in that night, he has a dream. God comes to him and says, "What is your request?" That's at Gibeon. And later on, you will find there is a mighty man of war that is a Gibeonite that's listed in Chronicles. So we kind of lose track of them later on, especially after the kingdom. And you hear a little bit about them, but after David and after Solomon, then you kind of lose them. But for the longest time, until Solomon built the temple, they were highly involved. I don't know. I didn't look that up, but I wonder if we could find out if they were moved as well to help the Levites and come in Jerusalem when Solomon built the temple there and cut wood and hauled water. But they were still a part of the kingdom there. So they make the covenant relationship. Now, this is going to create a huge problem for the other kings. And we'll get started into this, but we're not going to have time to finish it all. We'll see. There's 5 major kings that we're going to look at in the south. Now this is the king of Jebus. As soon as King Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem. Now you notice they use Jerusalem, but that's for the current reader, because that's not the name of the city when he conquered it. It's Jebus. Later on, we'll see that whenever David becomes king and unites them together, he goes up against Jebus, because that's the other thing, is they never conquered Jebus. That's what's interesting, is Jebus ends up sitting there, which is the future Jerusalem, until David becomes king and moves the capital to Jebus. Now remember, Jerusalem is also the place, Mount Zion. It's where Abraham offered Isaac. So it's got a big role coming up. You notice the last name of Adoni-Zedek, Melchizedek, hyphenated. So Melchizedek, the high priest, it's a term, remember it was a king, priest, Melchizedek, and then Dek were 2 words together to make a priest and king. And so the name here is basically an honorary, Adoni-Zedek, king, honor. And so when they heard about how Joshua had captured Ai and had devoted it to destruction, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, he feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were warriors. So that also helps us to look at the Gibeonites with a different role. They were not cowards. This was a big city. This was not something that Joshua was just going to roll over. And it was instrumental in where they were going to be when it come in. They were a blocking force, in other words. It was going to set up all these other kings were going to be able to come up underneath and help to supply and hold back this invading force of the Hebrews coming down. So this is an overall strategy that we see coming off the Transjordan, crossing over, hitting Ai, and then going south. And they're going to conquer and battle these kings, and then he's going to turn north. And then we're not going to go into all the battles and everything. We're going to hit a couple of them. They're pretty important when we go to the north, but we're not going to go through every one of them. But I wanted to show you this overall strategy that is brilliant. And it is so brilliant that actually there was a British officer during World War I followed this exact plan in World War I and invaded from the Transjordan, came across and followed that route and divided, because what happens? You basically are dividing them. Remember, they're not one nation. They're a bunch of small little city-states that are conglomerate. And now you divided the major highways and travel. And I thought that was amazing, that in World War II, in 1916, that this British officer leading the British commandos come across, and they cut across that, and they followed it. They followed Joshua's battle plan.
It worked for him.
It worked for him, exactly. Why would you not? I mean, it's a great tactic, and that's what I'm trying to show. God could have brought them across anywhere and swept through, but it shows you that God's tactics are pretty awesome in the way that He addressed this. So let's jump to 10:5, and then the 5 kings of the Amorites. So this is the Amorites. Amorites is also another you'll hear called Canaanites. So this is the conglomerate label for all of them. King of Jerusalem, king of Hebron, king of Jarmuth, king of Lachish, king of Eglon. So those are the 5 kings that are going to go to battle. They gather up their forces, and they went up with all their armies, and they encamped against Gibeon and made war against him. Why are they going at war with him? Well, one, they've sold out, right? But there's another problem as well from a military point of view. They know that Joshua is quite a distance away with his force. The Gibeonites are a very powerful force within themselves, and they've just made a treaty with them. If they wait and allow Joshua to bring his force down and join the Gibeonites, then they got to strike now. So, at first you look at it and go, well, it's punitive. They're just going after the Gibeonites because they betrayed them. No, it's that, but it's also more. They got to destroy the Gibeonites now because they believe they're going to join forces and fight with the Hebrews, which we never hear them fight with them. And we just read that the Gibeonites were warriors, and they had a stronghold. So that's what another aspect I hope maybe that was helpful, kind of bring out a little different point of view in the importance of why they went after him. Now, the men of Gibeon, of course, they sent to Joshua at the camp of Gilgal, saying, do not relax your hand from your servants. What does that phrase mean? Do not relax your hand from your servants. Don't let us go. You got a hold of us. You own us.
Mine says, do not forsake.
Don't forsake.
Don't forsake us.
Don't let us go. We've submitted. So now you need to come and take care of this. Come to us quickly and save us and help us. For all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the hill country are gathered against us. So Joshua, he went up from Gilgal, and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear them, for I give them into your hands. No man shall stand before you. That's something God constantly is reminding Joshua, isn't he? Don't be afraid. See, we assume that Joshua knows a precise, detailed battle plan of every move they're going to make. And if that's true, you're not going to want to take on 5 kings. What you want to do is divide them and kill and destroy as you're going on. In other words, destroy Ai, move on. Destroy Jericho, move on to Ai, move on to the next city, move on to the next city. But now you got 5 of them. So if you're Joshua, you just went, you kicked the hornet's nest. And so I can appreciate Joshua kind of going, wow, we just went from, going from king to king to king, and now we've got 5 of them lined up, and they're in battle formation. They're there. And Gideon is at least a day's march away. So I could see where it would be helpful.
Well, yeah, because the cities that they're getting ready to try to capture, They're fresh. They hadn't been fighting from city to city to city.
Mm-hmm.
And Joshua, they're tired.
And if they're going to have to march nearly 12 hours and go to battle, usually you move your forces ahead of time, let them rest, and then go to battle. These guys are sitting out there waiting for them to come down. Well, actually, they're waiting to go ahead and attack the Gibeonites, but they're definitely in a much more positive and advantage. So, 12 to 14. And at the time Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day that the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. So let's stop there. This is a summation statement. The writer is saying, at that time that Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day, when the Lord gave the Amorites and all the kings to the son, this is what he said in the sight of Israel. So this is a transitional narrative in a sense, a little, when he switches, the writer here. And he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Eglon. And the sun stood still, the moon stopped, until the nations took vengeance on the enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? The sun stopped in the midst of the heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. So, that's why I wanted to just bracket these verses together, because this is like a sub-narrative, and then he's going to switch back, and we'll look at next week more precisely what the battles occurred. This is kind of like sidestepping. Joshua's lined up, he's ready to travel, and then the narrative switches and says, when that day comes, when he attacked him and killed him, Joshua made this statement. He's requesting of God to stand still at Gibeon. Where's Gibeon? Well, that's where the battle's going to be. So, and now this is where it gets crazy, okay? Did the sun stop? Or is this something metaphorically?
Oh no, the sun stood still.
So if the sun stood still, that meant that the gravity would stop and the winds would continue, and we would have over 1,000-mile-an-hour winds ripping across the planet of the earth. Scientifically, okay?
Oh,
And the tides would have crashed. A third problem with it, if it physically, now I'm showing you some thoughts, because I read a ton of stuff about different things on what was this. Is it metaphoric or is it literal? And some of them make sense, some of them don't. There's actually this thing that's been going on for 40 years, this false thing that NASA in some supercomputer ran through some data and found a missing date. That's false. That's completely false. I listened to Dr. Hugh Ross. He's an astrophysicist Christian. And he said, no. It was supposedly at JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, that they ran these numbers and somehow they could go backwards and they could say, oh, we're missing a day. Yeah, you can't. First off, he said nobody recorded in detail the amount of times and stuff of eclipses and different things like this. So he blew that, said that doesn't make sense. And again, in our world of the physical laws, it would destroy the earth. Now, do you hear my key phrase there? According to our physical laws. And I like what Dr. Ross is saying is that, two things happen. You either have something supernatural, or you have something that's natural. Follows the laws of physics. Anything outside of that is considered miraculous. Creation in of itself was miraculous because it violated and established all the laws of thermodynamics that did not exist before. So it was all, in a sense, above what naturally can occur. Supernatural. Natural, if you're thinking just purely natural, that couldn't happen. It would literally tear. Now, the flat earthers will jump in on this one. And they'll say, see, it proves the earth's flat. Because the sun goes around, so it wouldn't matter. The earth is sitting here flat. right? So if the sun stopped, big deal. But if the earth is spinning and going around the sun and the sun stopped, that means the earth would have to stop. Not only would it have to stop rotating around the sun, but the earth, so example, we know the earth's doing this, right? But on top of that, it's doing this. It's rotating while it's going around and rotating around the sun. So if the sun stops, it would stop in one spot and the earth would have to stop. Now it could continue to move, but it'd have to stay right there over. But even the magma from a geology point of view, the tectonic plates would shift. And there's also another part that shoves this more towards supernatural. Is that one, and I think it discredits the fact that it was something physical, that the entire earth stopped. There is no culture in the entire world on any continent that records anything like this where the sun was 24 hours a day. Or if you're on the other side, it would have been dark for 24 hours. And we know that even like the flood story, even China has a flood story. Gilgamesh has a flood story. You go all around the world and you find where some of these great events occurred that we look in the Bible, and they're recorded. And that's one of the evidences that I read was saying, look, if the earth had literally stopped, there would have been something. Egypt, as being as close as they were, would have had something written down. Even Greece, they were writing. The Hellenistics would have wrote something. So there are some events, like the earthquake when Christ died. There's actually events that show these supernatural things that happened that were physical. But this has to be something really supernatural. And so why not? Why would you think that God couldn't put the sun and keep it illuminated on that spot for 24 hours?
It also says the moon.
Now, this is another one. I'm glad you brought that up, because here's another point. And this, I think I lost my mic. Yeah, I did. Well, one of the things that is also brought up is the month, the calendar, was driven around the idea of moon, full moon, new moon, and such. And so they were very superstitious about when the moon was full and the sun, because even like here, there's a phase of the moon that you can get up in the morning and you'll see the sun on one side and we'll see the moon on the other side, right? Mm-hmm. But they tracked it. It was like their clock. Do you notice the last time you saw that? Nah, we don't care because we use watches. But they did. They did. And they were very superstitious, and if there was something out of phase, and they knew every 14 or so many days that moon was going to be in a certain position at certain full moon, new moon, it was omen. And if it was covered or something like that, different, it freaked them out. So what the point was that there's also a possible psychological effect that if somehow all of a sudden the moon and the sun was to hang there, when they woke up, if you'll notice, we'll get to the battle, they ran. And so, because they're going to march all night, and then they're going to strike them in the mornings. And so in the morning, when they get up and they check their calendar, their alarm clock goes off, right? They didn't have one. They look and they go, whoa, wait a minute. The moon is full and the sun's up. Bad omen, guys. This is bad. So I think it as well was also a very an omen to the Amorites that threw them into more fear. Because the sign, in other words, what I'm reading, was that meant they were going to die. It was a bad omen for war, was to have the moon up on the wrong day of the month and the sun at the same time. So I do believe it was supernatural. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I got a little bit of mic. It's warning me we're out. Great class. We did get through it. We'll get into more of the precise battle and some of the judgments that are going on with them. Hope you'll be able to make it at 9:45 coming next Sunday morning for Bible study, 10:45 for worship, and then 6 p.m. back here again. We'll continue this. So till we meet again, God bless.
If we start guessing, well, this prophet said this happened, then in any other chapter, do we say, oh, did that really happen? We have